Hello, friends. Welcome to the ATC Double Cut. My name is Micah Woods, and I have a special guest today. It is Maggie Reiter, data scientist at Sunday. Welcome to the ATC Double Cut, Maggie.
Thanks, Micah. Really excited to be here. I am a voracious reader of a lot of your content and listen to the podcasts as well. So I'm happy to be a part of this.
Well, thank you. We talked about having you as a guest some time ago, and we talked about it again. And I sent another email, and I got an email from you a couple of days ago, and you said, finally, my schedule has freed up. I'm able to come on the show. And I said, awesome. Let's talk about turfgrass, because there's so many interesting things I want to talk with you about. I think the first time we met in person that I remember was in 2019 in June in California at the US Open. Did we meet before that?
No, I think that makes sense. We've probably been at the same places at maybe some meetings, but I think that's the first time we sort of bonded.
That and we bonded on some botanical walks. I
Yeah.
going to give a double cut treatment to a post uh, flights and favorite turf photos of 2019. I was just looking at this one, and there are some pretty awesome photos in it. So I will put a direct link to this in the show notes for anybody who wants to see this post. And I'm going to scroll down to one of the photos that I put in there from Pebble Beach in June of 2019. This was at the US Open, and we were both there together. And I said, I put a picture that showed all the different grasses at the back of the seventh green, that little par three at Pebble Beach. Is Poa annua on the greens, perennial ryegrass around the greens, tall fescue around the bunkers, fine fescue, and Bermuda grass, a warm season grass, as you get a little bit closer to the ocean and farther away from the putting green. And then kikuyu grass beyond that, and then salt grass down closer to sea level. So that is something that we were looking at. I think we went around the area and looked at all kinds of grasses, and you identified that salt grass for me. And we were really looking for zoysia, and we had a lot of fun with that. I said, I wrote in the post, I said, I had a great time at the US Open and talked about grasses in California and around the world with a lot of people. One grass I did not see around the seventh green was zoysia. Maggie Reiter and Eric Johnson and I. Eric Johnson is the director of grounds or golf course superintendent at Chambers Bay Golf Club, and he had formerly been at Spyglass Hill. He'd been the golf course superintendent at Spyglass Hill Golf Course, where he'd planted zoysia. So he knew there was a spot where zoysia had been planted on the Monterey Peninsula at Spyglass Hill. And we went on a botanizing expedition together over there, but we couldn't find any zoysia. So I shared a tweet story that we'd put together, and it's got a picture of me and you and Eric as we were out on that expedition, and we were looking for zoysia, and I just had so much fun when we did that, and I thought this is something that I would like to talk with you about, your continuing experiences with different kinds of grasses in different parts of the world, and eventually we'll transition into grasses on lawns, I think, because that is a very interesting topic.
Yeah. So there's seven, I think, different grasses on that Pebble Beach picture, and there's one more on the golf course. There's that whole chunk of the Paspalum that's along
Oh,
the 18th, just right to the right of this picture. It would have started. So it's pretty interesting. I consider it like an ecological staircase of all these different grass types.
yeah, it's really quite interesting how many species can be growing together, and then they're managed in a way to produce a really nice, visually attractive and high quality playing surface. You were back at the U.S. Open, the U.S. Women's Open in 2023.
Yeah.
Were you not?
Yeah. I go to Pebble any chance I can get. And yeah, so I was at the US Women's Open this last summer. And it was a a wonderful time again.
Did you happen to see any? Uh, did you do any more grass scouting expeditions?
Yeah, I dug around. It's the same stuff. That 17 green into the 18th, kind of the whole fairway. That's where all the most, I guess, that's a biodiversity hotspot for them. And I saw all those same grasses there. And like, I think there's a little more, or there was some newly established, like that past Palm area. That I remember that being a little more bigger or a little more sort of visible along the water.
But no zoysia.
No, oh no, no.
Yeah, I'm so interested in zoysia because I hear so many people talking about zoysia, and it seems like people are excited about the quality of zoysia, which high quality zoysia is one of the more attractive grasses that you will see. So it's
Yeah,
understandably popular. However, when you push that grass into a place where it's not well adapted or it can't grow in the wild. If it for me, I'm always interested, can the grass grow in the wild or can it not at a particular location? Because, creeping bent grass, well, let's take Poa annua. It's a common
hmm,
weed. People can expect to find it in a lot of places, but you won't find it in Bangkok. It can't survive in the wild in Bangkok. So Poa annua is a excellent putting surface at Pebble Beach, for example, on that seventh
yeah.
green, but it can't survive in Bangkok. Now, zoysia grass can survive in Bangkok, but it for some reason, and it can grow in the wild in Bangkok, but it's not growing in the wild
Mhm.
at Pebble Beach. So probably by just by simple logic, it wouldn't make sense to put that on a lawn in the Monterey Peninsula area. Just even though it's a high quality grass.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I'm trying to think back to there was a lot of like hype around Zoysia in California. Right at that time. It was like 2016, 2017. That's when I moved to California. People were putting like plots on golf courses. The USGA was even, talking about it. They're giving presentations about it. And I feel like I have not necessarily heard or read much about it lately or in the past few years. So I feel like it's almost it's evolved to the same kind of story of it hasn't really persisted in the culture. So I wonder, I don't know, like it's it's not going to necessarily thrive in those areas that it was established, or we would have heard a lot more about it. I think.
Yeah, probably. I know some of those trials that got done in the San Jose area
Yeah,
didn't do so well,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and so then they kind of got taken out. There's the Brambles golf course in the Napa Valley that went with Zoysia tees, Zoysia fairways, Zoysia greens, and I just thought, if you want to have a nice low input golf course in that climate, use Bermuda grass rather
yeah,
rather than zoysia. And I felt that one it's just like pushing the grass a little bit too far.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but
yeah. I'm with
in
you.
so yeah, how you went to University of Minnesota for your master's degree? Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
And bachelor's also there?
Yeah, yep.
And then you want to be an extension specialist in California, and then
Extension
you want
advisor, it's called in California. I had like a regional assignment, but yeah, so I did grad school at University of Minnesota. I worked with Eric Watkins and Brian Horgan there. And then after that, I came to California, worked for University of California Extension for 4 years. I was based in Fresno and assigned that sort of central region, but I did travel around a lot, and I got to see a lot of turf and golf around California.
and then you went back to Minnesota.
Yeah. So I have 4 years in California, and then I went back to the University of Minnesota to take that statewide extension job there. And I did that for a couple years, and then the last 3 years I've been at Sunday.
And for people who don't know Sunday, let's say they're outside of the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Or or if they're just unfamiliar with it, could you tell me a little bit about that company and what it does?
Yeah. At Sunday, we use a blend of tech and e-commerce to make custom lawn care products and plans for homeowners or for people managing lawns. Um, we use climate and property and customer data to make a tailored lawn plan, and it's a subscription based model. So you would get 2 to 3 shipments per year with these products like fertilizer, grass seed, weed control, just at the right time that you need them. Um, our philosophy is also to kind of empower and educate the customer and help them feel like they can take better care of their lawns and their backyards. And also not to use any conventional pesticides. So we only have natural and organic weed control products.
You
And
had a
it's a start. I should say it's a startup too, based out of Boulder, Colorado, and been in business for five years now.
and you shared a photo of organic herbicide treatments when you were in your role as an extension
Yeah,
advisor in
yeah,
California, and you showed that there could be some. I mean, that was a really cool image. Was like a time series
yeah,
of
yeah,
different treatments, and those had a good initial visual effect, but long term they didn't do so well.
yeah,
What's the
exactly.
current status of non-conventional weed control products?
A similar story. I mean, what you can see from that picture and consistently over the years is a lot of the products work the same way. They're contact quick burn down in 2 or 3 days, and then weeds or turf grass may start to grow back. Um, I feel like there is a lot of work to be done to figure out how to use these products most effectively. How to even just how to control weeds when they're small, and razor mowing heights and all the best management practices and how they would interact with that. But I feel like it's probably one of our most challenging subjects at Sunday is like the weed control or the weed pressure in home lawns and keeping I guess a grip on that with our programs.
Do you ever sell seed? Does Sunday
Oh yeah.
ever provide some seed packs to fill in dog damage or thin areas or something like that?
Oh, big time. We sell a lot of seed. I would say, and in fact, we sold out of some of our seed products last fall. And that is sort of our response to not using conventional pesticides, not having a pre-emergent. It's just aggressive, frequent overseeding to try to, again, just grow competitive turf grass that is going to, do better over time. Um, and we have spent a lot of time within the company and within like our messaging and our content and our marketing to teach I guess teach consumers that you can seed your lawn and you should seed your lawn regularly, and it's important and it can increase the health of your lawn, again, especially if you're not going to use conventional pesticides or herbicides. And I think we've finally been successful with that. Again, this last fall we did really great with our seed products. People were eating them up.
I've thought that for that type of company, selling seed would be a nice thing that actually would have a meaningful impact on improving lawns, and people would like to. Yeah, I mean, because it started off, I saw it as it was selling mostly fertilizer, and then
Yeah.
it's a natural extension to go into seed
Oh,
also.
for sure. Our
But
sort of iconic product is that liquid fertilizer pouch that attaches to the hose. And that's still like the majority, like the base of our program. The problem with seed is there's no seed for St. Augustine grass. So most of our, back to kind of grass types, most of our customers are cool season. So we sell a lot of fescues, fine and tall fescues. We do have a common Bermuda grass seed, but there is not that kind of easy and affordable option for plant propagation in a St. Augustine grass lawn. And about 15% of our customers are St. Augustine grass.
and are you selling in the continental U.S. only, or do you sell in Canada? What's your
Mm,
geographic region?
USA, including Alaska and Hawaii.
Okay, including
Yeah.
Alaska and Hawaii.
Yep.
And that's that is really interesting. You sent me an email and said you have a lot of soil samples. How many soil test results do you have for the lawns now?
Yeah, I guess I missed this when I was describing Sunday. So part of the program too is everybody gets a free soil test when they sign up for our subscription. So that's like the first thing we do, and it's kind of the start of their Sunday journey. And with that, over the years, we have now a database of 200 and almost 230,000 lawn soil tests from all over across the country.
Have you summarized those? You must have
Yeah,
looked.
actually, I pulled it up. I have it in front of me because I thought you might ask it.
Okay, good.
I mean, what do you want to know?
Yeah. Can you tell me the range of pH? Like
Okay.
what's the minimum pH and maximum pH you've tested?
Okay, let's see here. pH. All right. So let's say 80%, like the center kind of 80 percentile people is between 5.6 and 7.9.
Okay. That's
The
that's
bottom
good.
one, the bottom 1% is like 4.9 pH.
Oh,
That would be very unusual. Yeah.
yeah,
But
that's not
yeah.
yeah, that's not too bad.
And the highest pH is like 8.3. And again, those are outliers. I shouldn't give them that much attention. I would almost like wonder if the soil test might be wrong. But those are like the extreme, ends of what we see or have in our database.
Can you share which lab is used
Oh,
or is
sure.
that
We use Brookside, which I know that you're connected to.
good? Yeah, good answer.
And yes.
I know. I've been. I didn't know if you could share that, but I've been to Brookside Labs when the Sunday sample deliveries are
Oh,
coming in. It's awesome.
okay.
They've got an entire special system to deal with that. Um,
Yeah.
just because it's very streamlined and that is a very
Yes.
high quality lab. I made a video. I'll put a link to that where I kind of showed how samples come into the lab and then go step by step. And they can do
Okay.
something like 6,000 samples a day. It's really
Wow.
cool. Lots of robots, lots of highly trained staff who
Yeah.
are paying attention to each sample at every step of the way. And it's just amazing how all those data then get onto one report after being tested for so many different things. And then all that data comes onto the report at the end.
Yeah. We have a pretty slick system, and Brookside has been great to work with. I mean, as you know, but it says that we send little, paper baggies or soil test bags to the customers, and often they have Brookside printed on the bag, so it's not a secret by any means. Um, and they do a great job, very fast, very consistent. Everything is maybe like three, which we like. So yeah, that's how it works for
Do you
us.
run an organic matter test on those samples?
Yeah, we do. We do quite a bit. Okay, so here's the highlights. Here's what I think are the highlights. Organic matter. The median organic matter is 4.9, which is quite good, right?
That's
For a
good.
long, for a long. Yeah. The median pH is 6.9, which is good. And we just talked about most lawns are within a adequate range. Um, Nutrient deficiencies are not common. Most lawns are perfectly fine, and they don't need a lot of additional fertilizer beyond the regular nitrogen. Um, what else? Salt. So we did when the company was kind of in the first couple of years, we did soil salinity test or EC, and we saw so few lawns that had moderate or high salinity problems that we stopped doing the test because it actually cost a little bit extra to do that, and it just was not I mean, like a handful of lawns, more in the Southwest, like Arizona, Southern California, but it was so uncommon that we stopped even testing it.
Yeah, I think I used to test it regularly. I'm mostly dealing with golf course samples
Yeah.
from multiple countries around the world, and I know in some locations it's an issue, but I was finding in Asia it rains a lot, and anywhere that it rains a lot, you're not going to have big salinity problems. And so I kept getting samples that just had negligible levels of
Yeah.
salinity. And I'm like, why are we spending extra money and extra time to do this test, having to send extra material to the lab so that they
Yeah.
have enough soil to work with for that? So I've just stopped doing it unless we know that that site has a history of salinity issues. And what I can do, you can pick it up just by looking at sodium, or if you look at sodium and
Sure.
potassium and sulfate or something, and those are really high, that tells you have a salinity issue. So yeah, if you know you have a salinity issue, that's something to test. But for a
Yeah.
lot of places, it does not need to be worried about.
Yeah. And we talked to Luke at Brookside about this a little bit too, and he kind of taught me a lot about how the irrigation water often matches the soil, or the soil matches the irrigation water a lot, and in recycled water settings is where you would have some of these issues, and it makes me wonder. I wonder if not that many lawns are on recycled water, if that's just related to like infrastructure and development, and kind of why not. If that could be part of the reason for why we do not see salinity issues.
Yeah, because there's a lot of parks
Yeah,
and golf courses
yeah,
that would be on recycled water that you instantly know you've got a salinity issue because there's a lot of salt in the irrigation water.
right.
And then you mentioned not many nutrient deficiencies. Can
No,
you Are there phosphorus? Is there an overabundance of phosphorus?
yeah. I mean, the median. I think there's plenty of phosphorus in loss. The median phosphorus is 62 ppm,
Okay. Okay. That's
and
interesting. You've got a massive data set of 200 and
yeah,
almost
200,
230,000 samples. You've got that median. We did a global soil survey that only had like
yeah,
163 samples, something like that. We also got a very similar median.
huh?
So I think when you don't need that many soils to figure out what's normal.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm going to trust your data of 200 and some thousand better than n equals 163.
Yeah. Well, and I also add to it too. So if you look at them compared to the current MLSN thresholds, we see low phosphorus 14% of the time. That's the most common quote deficiency that shows up versus up against the MLSN kind of guidelines.
Oh, okay, nice. So, but you don't see a lot of 200, 300 phosphorus.
No, that would be in like the 90th percentile, those people.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do customers, if they have a subscription for 1 year and then they subscribe again for the next year and they just
Mhm.
continue it, do they do a soil test every year or every couple years? How does that work, or is it only at the start?
Right now, it's only at the start, but we just started selling what we call a la carte soil tests this past fall. So you can go and buy a Sunday soil test off Amazon, and so people take multiple tests themselves. And so I think we'll start to see more of that kind of tracking lawns over time. But we also have done some experiments, just within the company. We have retested customer soil after 1 year and after 2 years, and the truth is, we do not see a lot of change. Any of these nutrient values, the organic matter, it does not move very much after 2 years, kind of on the Sunday program. Um, so if we were, I don't think we would ever test a lawn every single year. Maybe every 2 or 3 years, if they wanted to, but it doesn't. The values just don't move that much.
How do people collect the samples? How do you control for depth? That you give
Yeah, I
instructions
wish I
on?
had a I wish I could show you so we have a soil sampling tool that we send
Mhm.
everybody, and it's like an apple core. So it sticks right into the ground, kind of up to the handle, about 4 inches. And that's what we say. Go get 4 inches, take a sample from several locations across your yard, put them in this bag and mix them up. Um, So it's that kind of top 4-inch profile.
Okay. So uh, you're basically instructing the customers. You're providing the tool. You're instructing to sample to what's basically a 4-inch depth, and you're assuming that they're able to do that. That the soil's not so compacted and dry that they can't get the sampler into the ground.
Correct. And that can be a problem, and that just is there's I guess a wider learning there of like getting people to take this, getting consumers to take this data and maintaining a certain level of quality. We have videos, we have blog posts, we have all sorts of instruction sheets to kind of demonstrate how you're supposed to do this step by step. And that is probably the biggest problem. If the soil is too firm, dry, or compacted, that they can't necessarily take a deep sample. So that certainly happens across some of our soil tests, but it's hard to say how much.
And so you're taking. Do you look at micronutrients also?
Yeah.
Wow. You could.
Here's what we
People are
have:
getting a
15
comprehensive
different.
test.
I have 15 different things. So the big kind of the top three, I think, organic matter, pH, CEC, or cation exchange. Then we have the 5 MLSN nutrients, and then we have aluminum, boron, copper, iron, manganese. What else? No, that's in it. Zinc, sodium. I think that's it.
Okay, so you're basically getting something that's similar to the standard soil test from Brookside. Are you doing just one type of phosphorus though? You're not getting a Bray 2 or an Olson, are you?
No, nope.
Okay, so yeah, and you're not
How,
doing a
so well, let
buffer
me ask you,
pH or anything.
how could that maybe affect our whole sort of database of these soil tests?
It if you had if you had two different types of phosphorus,
Yeah.
I think the only thing it does is just allows you to have a direct measurement for some of the regionally used soil tests. Like I assume Olson which is a sodium bicarbonate extraction for phosphorus. That's something that works well in high pH soils. Malic 3 works fine in high pH soils too, but if you're in Iowa perhaps or Minnesota, it might be common to have some calibration for an Olson test. And so all that does is just allows you to have that exact measure. But you can try to convert the Malic 3 to that if you wanted to for a research project.
Yeah, I've seen you have written about this. You had some fact sheets that had sort of conversions. Yeah, and the University of Minnesota lab uses the Bray and Olson for phosphorus.
Yeah. So it's just like having a number, but if you're doing something on a national scale, it makes sense to use Malic 3, I think. So
Okay.
awesome. Yeah,
That's what
that's
we're
cool.
doing.
I think you asked me if it would make sense to use your data and calculate some type of MLSN for lawns, and I think
Yeah.
it does make sense. So that you would set your 10% level, because right now you're comparing. You mentioned for phosphorus that you've got 14% of the samples are below
Yeah.
21 parts per million, which is the MLSN minimum based on a golf course data set, primarily a golf course data set, and something that we were trying to look at low CEC soils, but because you're dealing with higher CEC soils, it would be interesting to check, real carefully what's normal in your data set. And that might be useful in the future then for new clients to be comparing directly against lawns instead of comparing to something that was specifically for, well, I mean, kind of specifically for golf course putting
Yeah.
greens, and
Yeah.
then assuming that if this works for putting greens, it should work for everything else, which I think is a reasonable assumption to make, because a lawn that has a 4.9% organic matter, and that's a substantial amount of nutrient holding and nutrient supply. So I assume that lawn is going to need less fertilizer than a golf course putting green that's grown in sand. But it's nice to actually study your data a little bit more.
Well, but what I like about the MLSN today is that it drives people to use less, way less, and we need that on lawns for sure, fertilizing less. And if we were to look at our distribution of soil tests and use that, that low is 10%, I guess model that you fit to that, wouldn't all of our values be higher then? Wouldn't that bottom 10%, all the values would be much higher than the current MLSN? So I feel like that would actually not be the direction I would want us to go in.
Well, I expect it would, but you won't really know until you check it. So
Okay.
it may be that it turns out relatively similar. And it's just nice to know what the number would be. And then you can make a decision about whether sticking with the official MLSN is the way to go, or whether you make your own.
That
I
makes sense.
because, for example, your phosphorus would probably be lower, right?
Why?
Because you're finding 14% of your values are lower than 21. So that would
Yes.
indicate that probably
Oh,
you'd be at like 17 or something.
okay.
Okay.
That,
And so and I would have assumed it would be different, but probably
yeah.
golf courses tend to get over fertilized, perhaps even more than lawns do. And your nutrient holding capacity for cations, like potassium,
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
going to be higher. So probably your potassium would be higher, but lawns
Okay.
might be under fertilized on the whole. If you look at 200,000 lawns, they might be less over fertilized than golf course turf is, which is professionally managed, and everybody wants to prevent a deficiency, and they make sure that they have enough phosphorus. And so it may be that your numbers are similar, or in the case of phosphorus, even lower.
Okay, that's interesting. That compels me to pursue this question a bit more. Um, what about? Oh, I forgot what I was going to ask. It was related to the. Yeah, I don't know. Oh well.
Oh well. Let's
Yeah.
let's let's circle back to this. I want to
Okay.
ask a little bit about how you
Oh
figure
wait,
out
wait. I
which.
just
Oh,
remembered. Sorry.
okay.
We would need to validate that the samples are coming from areas of healthy turf grass, and we don't necessarily do that right now. That would be like a new piece of information we'd have to get from customers.
I
Which,
assumed I
yeah.
assumed that customers are sending you pictures or something of their lawns. Are they,
Um,
or
many do, but not like not with the soil test, not necessarily connected to the soil test. Um, and when you did the official original MLSN, and it says, these samples come from, what do you call it? Good looking turf, or areas where turf is growing
good
well.
per, good
Oh,
performing turf?
okay. It- I guess how is that like defined or validated? You just ask people to say where their samples were from.
But that's how the global soil survey was done. The
Yeah.
global soil survey, we specifically asked choose from good performing turf.
Okay.
The MLSN was more like the opposite of bad. So what we did is we took everything that was flagged as problem areas, bad areas, research samples, top dressing sands, any type of test, good, bad test, and those were all discarded. And so then it's just from professionally managed normal turf, which we're saying is good performing. So it
Okay.
wasn't like explicitly sampled from the best turf on the property, where the global soil survey was please collect the samples from good performing turf.
Okay.
So it's pretty loose,
Yeah.
but we have the assumption that professionally managed turf that's not from a problem area is pretty good. And
Yeah.
I've visited a lot of these places, a lot of the places where the MLSN data came from, and I will vouch for myself. that it is good performing turf.
Okay. That's one way. Yeah, that sounds good. Um, oh, and I was also going to tell you too that so we have all these soil tests. We have so many in some neighborhoods that we can predict what a soil test measurement would be at a new address in that neighborhood.
I would have thought that the soils would have some spoils or something involved with the construction that might make them unpredictable from lawn to lawn within the same neighborhood.
I mean, so we know that many of our customers are new homeowners, and a lot of these homes are newly built. And I mean, like I just said, I guess the data doesn't necessarily show that. There's a certain loss of confidence when you are predicting for a new address, but it's better than I thought it would be. We have looked at kind of predicted versus actuals with some smaller kind of studies we've done, and the one thing that we found was that the lawn soils are sandier than is predicted by like the Web Soil Survey, which it has maybe limitations in urban areas, but that I feel like maybe from construction activities.
Do you think there is there also a lingering compaction that might happen because of construction? I've often wondered about the ability to decompact lawn soils, where it's relatively
Yeah,
easy on a football pitch or on a golf course fairway. If you have a big tractor and a deep tine aerifier, you can run that and decompact the
yeah.
soil. On a lawn, I'm not quite sure how you would really do it. And then is it necessary? Are there a lot of lawns that have that problem?
Yes. I don't know if it's from construction, but from pets, from dogs. I mean, that is one of our other sort of top challenges is managing traffic from pets and kids. But more of our customers have pets than have kids in their household.
And so those pets are like making a path by just running in the same
Yes.
area constantly.
That or they just over the entire. I feel like it's over the entire lawn in a lot of cases, and if it's wet, it gets really torn up and muddy. And um, I wish we knew more about like I guess management of that kind of traffic or management of traffic in home lawns, like you said, and what mechanisms to take to correct it or treat it. Other than you say, oh, well, reduce traffic. That's hard if somebody has two mid to large size dogs running around in a 2,000 square foot backyard.
Yeah, I think I I was I was helping an Australian startup that's
Oh yeah.
that's no longer in business. Was what was it?
Well, yeah.
Yardley or something like that.
You don't. You should know what. Yeah, I remember when they. I remember seeing their marketing.
Yeah, and but yeah, that startup it went for a couple of years and didn't quite make it. But I saw a lot of photos from their first set of test customers, and the
Hmm.
types of problems on lawns they often seem to me very difficult to solve because
Yeah.
it involved shaded corridors between a fence and the house with foot traffic and pet traffic on it. It's like how
Yep.
what do you do there? It should be a
And I know
sidewalk, not a lawn.
there. Yes, yes. I was just gonna say there's the point where you cannot grow grass. And I think a lot about your something I've seen you've write of. There's kind of four things required for growth. It's light, adequate moisture, adequate soil. What was it? Temperature.
Hmm.
Is that right? Those are kind of four parameters, and you can break down a lot of any and all turf problems into those four kind of frames. And but at what point is it too much? Like it's not feasible to grow grass. The traffic levels or the light levels. Um, and I don't know. I thought like should we make a model for that? But it's still like not it's not super helpfulness or actionable to say, okay, you can't have grass here because there's too much traffic or there's not enough light.
Yeah, maybe it's something for people to figure out for themselves.
Yeah.
But
But with the pets, the best approach or philosophy we have is like to treat it like a sports field, where it's like aggressive overseeding and aerifying as much as possible. But again, the equipment for that is limited in a home lawn.
yeah, I did a series on my YouTube channel helping my brother-in-law with his lawn in southern Canada. And we did a soil test at Brookside. I made fertilizer recommendations based on that. I visited the site and looked at the species composition and the amount of weeds there, and I made some fertilizer recommendations based on that. I made mowing recommendations, and then because of the weeds there, I thought it would be nice. There was a lot of clover, and I thought we can introduce some grass seed into these areas. And so I made a recommendation for some particular species at that location in southern Ontario, and I also made some specific instructions about don't do this unless you can use the right kind of seeding machine. I wanted to get seed to soil contact.
Yeah.
So I said, if you can rent one of these machines that can break the soil surface, please use that and put the seed, because you're investing $100. In
Yeah.
this case, it's a pretty big lawn. It was, and it was high quality seed. I'd recommend it. So it was probably $50 or $100 worth of seed that he was putting down. But I didn't want him to just scatter it and have the birds eat it. I wanted that to go into the soil. And he actually did rent a seeder, but then he sent me pictures and I wasn't so pleased because it never really broke the surface, even though it
Oh,
had the blades weren't set deep
yeah.
enough. And
Oh.
and and I think it's really a struggle with the seeding. How do you overcome that at Sunday? Or what
I,
advice do you give for spreading the seed packs? Or does it come
we
as a
have
hydromulch or something?
Well, we have detailed. I'll say the best thing is like detailed instructions and videos. People love videos. That sort of step by step or that recipe of like how to seed. People respond well to that. Our Most of our seed does have some like paper mulch in it as well, and I actually think that helps. There's at first I thought we should just give them more seed. We should not be like diluting the product with this paper mulch. But I actually think it makes a difference and it does help kind of hold some moisture. Um, but that's mostly it. In just trying to set expectations. The other thing Sunday does well or does different is again having more fescues, but they don't germinate as fast as perennial ryegrass does. So trying to set the expectation of like, it'll take a couple weeks here before you start to see some growth or some of these fescues come up.
That's it's just so fascinating what you're doing at Sunday, and trying to improve the lawns and help people. What did you describe about educating people or empowering people
Yeah.
to have better lawns? What?
Yeah. People have very low confidence about lawn care or how to take care of their lawns or take care of their backyards. Um, like I said, a lot of our customers are new homeowners or have been in their house for less than 2 years. And so a lot of our kind of branding and messaging is to be really supportive and help them feel confident in themselves, that they can do this and they can take care of their lawn and make that easy. And we do that with, again, instructions, the specific application timings we give. We say, use this at this time or, product recommendations. We have a lot of like sort of recommendation engines for seed and fertilizer and getting into weeds and weed control timings too.
And and as far as seed goes, if I'm in Orlando and I've got a St. Augustine grass lawn, which
Mhm.
is buffalo grass in Australia. It's Stenotaphyrum secundatum as a scientific name. If uh, if I've got that, do I just not get any seed? I don't assume you're
Correct.
sending them ryegrass or anything.
No, no, no. We shouldn't. I mean, we're not. It's designed not to do that. No, they do not get seed. We wouldn't give them Bermuda grass seed. So what we can do is we say propagate, like propagate. If you have bare or thin areas, propagate it yourself. Like take plugs, from your own yard, or if you want to go buy plugs or sod, that's what they can do. And or trying to give them a little bit more fertilizer to help those areas fill in.
Yeah, that I suppose you could contract with a greenhouse and ship plugs, couldn't you? Like eventually that could be
Yeah,
a development for that type of grass that needs to be vegetatively propagated.
yeah, yeah. That is something that we have talked about. But we don't have that right now.
You've done some work in the past. I checked the turfgrass information file for your name as an author and found oh scores of documents that you've written or theses or abstracts or reports, and I came across one from 2020 about looking at different methods for finding climate zones for like grass adaptation, and that
Yeah,
was from the 2020
okay, I'm trying to
crop
look this up.
science meetings. Well, there's not a huge amount of information in the abstract, but I was just thinking about it this morning. I was like, wow, that's cool, and I had the idea. Wouldn't it be nice to make a web app like a Shiny app, like take the World Meteorological Organization data set, like at a monthly level, where you'd have like high temperature, average temperature, low temperature, and precipitation, and just be able to search. Like if I was looking at Lisbon, Portugal, for example, and then I wanted to say which American locations are the most similar, to be able to
Hmm.
just run, just do a search and set it up so that it could identify the most similar places.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that seems possible.
Oh yeah, I think so, and I have to say a lot of this concept came from Eric Watkins with sort of his like breeding mindset and cultivar selection and some place like Intep's integration of we have our turfgrass climate zones across the United States are cool season, warm season, and the transition area, but it's much more complicated than that. And in fact, should these zones be what you kind of described, maybe more gridded raster maps, or but I guess what I want to say is like non-contiguous areas, right? Where the growing climate of northern Minnesota might be closer to Vermont than it is to like Wisconsin. And so you'd have these
Mm.
these patches of non-contiguous areas. The best sort of maybe visual I've seen of that is like the I think it's the EPA eco ecological zones. Oh gosh, I wish I could get that. Oh, ecoregions. Yes, from the EPA's like ecoregions. They have
I,
like a few different scales, yeah, of them. And some, I think one of them is like there's 150 different ecoregions across the United States. So what if we use something like that for our turf grass selection approach? Um, it's probably a little sharper than the three cool, warm, and transition zones we have now, which are just what we call expert drawn maps.
I'm
They're not
gonna
necessarily.
look. I'm gonna look for those ecoregions, which I haven't seen that map. And if I find a good example, I'm gonna put a link to that in the show notes. And if I don't, I'm gonna ask you to send it to me, and then I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah,
So
happy to.
yeah, and for me, you know what I would think of it as far as non-contiguous is looking at the places in the world where kikuyu grass grows, because what you
Yeah,
find is they're like on these islands. So if I go to southern India at a 1,800 meter elevation, I will find kikuyu grass. If I go to the big island of Hawaii and go up a little bit away, on the Kona side, just go up a little
yeah,
bit from the ocean, I'll start to find these huge pastures of kikuyu grass. If I go to Pebble Beach, I can find kikuyu grass. And And if I go to Kenya at a certain elevation, one would find kikuyu grass. And if one goes to Johannesburg, South Africa,
Yeah.
I believe one could find kikuyu grass. And those are a lot of non-contiguous areas, but it's a place where the climate is suitable for that grass.
Well, and when you described like looking at maybe global maps, high temp, low temp, precip, that's close. I feel like that's kind of on the path of the our plant hardiness zones or USDA plant hardiness zones. Those are based on the lowest minimum temperatures, and they have like there's some variations I've seen of like the highest maximum temperatures. They call them like I don't know, plant heat zones or something like that. And so I feel like the way that people are approaching garden planting is on that track.
I am intrigued by that because I see certainly on the golf side. I know you did your master's research was about fine fescue and on fairways, wasn't it?
Yeah,
And and that's such a it has the potential to be such a good golfing surface, and
yeah,
and it has the potential to be a low input, high. Excuse me. It has the potential to be a low input, high quality golfing surface, and yet it probably wouldn't be in South Texas. It probably wouldn't be high quality in South Texas, and it probably wouldn't be low input in South Texas either.
right. Yeah,
And
the whole southeast where it's just the humidity too wet.
and I think it's interesting to consider because people use that, for example, in Nebraska, and I think
Hmm.
it's okay. But then what if you go to like how far
Yeah,
and it I don't know where that limit is. But I'm intrigued. I've mentioned on this show before. We mentioned zoysia earlier, and maybe we can kind of wrap up a little bit with this. I'm interested in zoysia. I'm interested in fescue, and there's a place just south of Lisbon that has both on golf courses, and I just wonder how it's going to work out because it it seems like zoysia is a grass that works well in hot, humid areas. Excuse me, I've got a something stuck in my throat. The and it seems like fine fescue uh, is quite different than zoysia in the climate that it's going to thrive in, and so for those grasses to be on golf courses, basically side by side in Portugal, I think it's really interesting to see which one is going to be better adapted, or maybe
yeah,
neither. And in golf, I see maybe it's not so bad in lawns because maybe you're not supposed to fail so much. I don't know, but in golf, people push grasses because of their supposed characteristics into certain locations where the grass may not work, but they say, well, we're going to have a professional taking care of it, and that person is
hmm,
going to have a lot of resources, and then that person taking care of it, of course, knows how you could grow zoysia in a place where it's not perfectly adapted, or could grow fescue in a place where it's not perfectly adapted. But environmentally, and just like, do you want to be doing so much work to try to keep a grass alive where it's not well adapted? So I'm
yeah.
terribly interested in that from a golf side, and also just from a lawn side. Also, how do we know which grasses we should use to get the best conditions with the easiest way of doing the work?
Well, I like the like modeling and off some of the climate extremes and moisture extremes. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, and I think of Lisbon as being Mediterranean, right? Right. I'm like California in a way. And there's fine fescues that do fine all over California, especially in the no mow or unmown areas, where there's not a lot of zoysia grass in California or places where I've been. So time will tell, but I feel like it depends on the height of cut. But I feel like fine fescues would be okay in an unmown setting.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that as I was getting ready for the call, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice if I could just go to a website and check what's the most similar place in the US to this location so that I could say, well, this is something like Raleigh, or this is something like Dallas, or this is something like San Diego. Um, and, and I know they sort of have websites that are like that, but this would be
Yeah.
something that's geared towards turf grass. Just,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
I feel like the New York Times does like maps like that where they go viral. You know, maybe you could, if you made something, you better put some servers behind it, or brace it for traffic. It might go viral.
Yeah, well, viral in the turf business.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Maggie, thank you so much for joining me on the ATC Double Cut. I would like to talk some more about lawns. Is there at another time? But is there anything else that we should talk about today before we sign off?
No, I think you covered. We covered a lot here. I'm trying to think of some of the notes I sent you beforehand. We can save some of them until next time, like the sulfur cut topics.
Okay. Well, you brought up sulfur. Let's talk about sulfur, and
Okay.
and then
Okay.
we'll close it out. You mentioned that lawn products often have a lot of sulfur in them.
Yeah, I see
The
that
fertilizers
from
tend to.
other brands. There's a lot of sulfur that's just in a lot of lawn fertilizers, and I'm not sure why it's there.
I don't know. Travis Shaddix might know because
Okay.
I think he might say that it's because they put calcium sulfate as a filler or something, because there has to be something in the product.
Okay.
But I I have been doing some tissue testing and find that sulfur is present in the leaves of a lot of species at similar levels to phosphorus and calcium, which means it's usually going to be about
Hmm.
0.5% up to 0.7, 0.8%, which is a substantial amount, because you're basically looking at nitrogen, number one, is going to be about 4% in a lot of species. And then potassium will be about 1.5% or something like that. And number three, you'll have phosphorus and calcium, usually about 0.5%. And sulfur is right there with them. But there's not a lot of, sulfur in soils is an anion, it's sulfate, is the form that plants take up, and it's soluble, it leaches. It's not held, obviously, on cation
Yeah.
exchange capacity. Most soils don't have a huge amount of anion exchange capacity. And so, excuse me, the question is, can that soil supply enough? And a lot of that can come from mineralization because there's sulfur in the organic matter. And if you've got lawn soils with a median organic matter content above 4%, I'm almost
Mhm.
certain that you'll be getting enough sulfur mineralized. So you should be fine.
Okay. Have you ever seen a sulfur deficiency?
I expect I have, but I haven't identified it as that. But
Hmm.
I suspect I have. And and specifically on tropical carpet grass, Ixonopus compressus, it often gets a streaking of yellow on the leaves, that I
Hmm.
think could be a sulfur deficiency, because it's in condition. At first, I thought it was an iron deficiency, but it's so prevalent, it's so common, and it's happening in soil conditions in which you should expect to see a lot of iron availability. And so I've said, okay, I need to go make some trials and see if
Yeah.
I can collect the leaves and do some tissue testing, and also apply some sulfur and see if I can make that problem go away. I have not done that yet, but that's one that I suspect. And
Okay.
I just guess in some sandy soils, that you would have darker green color and more vigorous growth if more sulfur was applied. I suppose.
Okay. Okay. Our
But
median sulfur level is 13.
yeah, so that's much higher. Well, maybe that's
What's
what my median would be too.
okay?
But I basically, the MLSN The current MLSN has a lot of samples in it from the Pace Turf data set. And the Pace Turf data set was largely coming from California and the American Southwest.
Oh, sure.
And those soils tend to have relatively higher amounts of sulfur. And because it's leachable,
Okay.
it's leachable, but those soils aren't getting leached so much. So the MLSN is biased a little bit to have the sulfur perhaps a little bit higher. And that's why the MLSN minimum for sulfur, I believe, is 7. And
Okay.
it's really normal for me on golf course putting greens to have 5, 6, 7. And it's 5, 6, 7, 8. Those are the type of levels that I typically see. But I don't know that soil, it's kind of like soil testing for nitrogen. Soil testing
Okay.
for sulfur might be a little bit more useful than testing for nitrogen, but it's not something that I'm terribly excited about. And the reason why it's in MLSN to begin with is because we were simply trying to come up with an alternative to SLAN, the sufficiency level of available nutrients.
Oh.
And if you look at the Caro et al. Articles about it, they always listed those 5 nutrients. And it's like,
Oh.
I'm not so excited about calcium and magnesium soil recommendations, and I'm excited about phosphorus and potassium, but because the there's an article from 2004 called
Okay.
Clarifying Soil Testing Part 3, which gives the SLAN nutrient ranges. I can put a link to that in the article also, or sorry, a link to that in the show notes. And that's by Caro et al. In Golf Course Management Magazine. But if you do look at the stuff that Caro published in the 1990s, in the Soil Fertility and Chemical Problems book, in this 2004 article that I always consider like these are the standard SLAN guidelines, it included calcium, magnesium, potassium, phosphorus, sulfur. So when we developed MLSN, we said, okay, we'll propose these guidelines. But I've always been, when I'm making fertilizer recommendations, when I'm doing soil test reports, I really pay attention to phosphorus and potassium. Calcium, magnesium, and sulfur, I'm not interpreting those so directly based on the soil reports,
Huh.
based on the soil
Yeah.
tests.
Okay, that's very interesting. I did not necessarily know that. I've read all the papers and I read your blog posts and presentations. I didn't know that was the rationale for choosing, I guess, some of those other nutrients beyond P and K.
Well, if you look at the very original MLSN, which was presented in 2012 at the Boyokos conference in
What?
Philadelphia or near Philadelphia, there's other things in there, maybe, iron, nitrogen and stuff. So that was the original one. Larry was
Oh,
excited. Oh yeah.
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 Wait, wow.
Well,
So where do I find this? I always go
um
to that Pure J paper. It's like kind of the
yeah.
source of truth. Okay.
Well, yeah, that's the most official one that you can get
Okay.
right now.
Okay.
But there's been various iterations. And uh,
Oh,
I told Larry, like, just because we can do all this stuff with the numbers, it doesn't mean we need to. And I always
yeah.
wanted to simplify it. So
Yeah.
so Larry and I agreed, because Larry had nitrogen in it, he had sodium in it, and said don't go
Oh,
above.
wow.
The original one had keep your sodium below a certain level, and all of this
Huh.
stuff. And I was like, Larry, that's too complicated. Let's just duplicate what Caro et al. Have as a recommendation with our own guidelines. So Larry agreed with me. So basically, from about 2014, it was simplified to that level, and
Huh.
and that was something that I was glad to do.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but
Wow.
yeah, we have Olson phosphorus MLSN from the original. We have Bray 2 phosphorus MLSN minimum from the original, and Larry at various times calculated some micronutrient ones, but I don't like soil testing for micronutrients and reading too much into it. So I just didn't want my name on guidelines that were recommending iron level
Oh,
based on a Malick 3 soil test.
huh. Okay. I mean, I'm with you on that. You know, a lot of our customers, their soil test is their report is good. Like, there's no, they're always looking for problems to fix or actions to take to improve their soil, and I guess it's kind of difficult sometimes to say, oh, your soil's fine. You know, there's nothing to really discuss here. Let's move on and kind of talk about something else. But it's like disappointing to them when there's not an action that they can take based off of the soil test. Um, but that's the truth. Is most soils are fine. They're functional, healthy. They don't need anything.
That's very good. All right. Well, thank you so much, Maggie. I really enjoyed having you on the show, and I'm so glad you're able to talk about that work that you're doing with a really interesting company and really interesting. It's such an exciting role you have. So
Yeah.
I hope we
Thanks.
can continue to discuss this and talk more about lawns, and you can educate me more about lawns and what's required for their good maintenance.
Okay. Well, I look forward to that. Let's keep chatting.
Okay. Thank you so much. I will sign off now and be back again soon for ATC from Hokkaido, Japan. I'm Michael Woods. Bye bye.